Okay, I'm going to give a talk on MongoDB. Just getting started, a little bit about Couch, comparing it to Couch, and MongoMapper, and I'm going to try to bring Python in a little bit. Okay, first, who am I? I'm Scott Motte. I actually live inland California, and I come down here. This is my third meeting, and been really enjoying it. There's hardly any Ruby guys kind of in my area. Okay, for install, I'm going to move fast through this. The slides are up on SlideShare. SlideShare.net/ScottMotte if you guys want to follow along. But Leopard install is really easy. Compared to CouchDB, it's not quite as easy because they have that CouchDBX program. It's really quick to get started. But I found that the Linux install is a lot easier. It's just from source, and I had quite a few problems getting CouchDB going with getting Erlang on there and things like that. So for installation-wise, MongoDB is nice and quick and simple and easy. Running it, it's the same on Leopard, obviously, as Linux. Just sudo MongoD run, and that is the right spelling. So, and then it has a MySQL-like command line. So then once you've got that running, open up another terminal, get in there, run Mongo, and it's schemaless and things. So to start with the database, you just say use and the name of the database, and then that'll set DB to the name of the database you created, and then you go ahead and create what's kind of like a table but a collection, they call it, and you just say db.books.save, and that'll create your document and your collection right then and there. So nice and quick. There's no setting up migration-wise or anything like that, which is nice. And then to find the first book, just dbbooks, find one, and then you can pass parameters in there to find what you want. And it's just JSON that you're passing in there. Everything's stored JSON-wise, like CouchDB. So Mongo or Couch is kind of one of the questions that a lot of people are starting to think about if they're considering these schemaless data stores. MongoDB is C++, CouchDB is Erlang. CouchDB is REST, which is really nice, where MongoDB has a driver for each language. So there's a Python driver, a Ruby driver, a PHP driver, which is arguably a little faster. But in production and stuff, not too much of a difference there. Technically, MongoDB is BSON, which is just JSON binary format. So they have a little extra things they can put in there. They can have a date stamp. Instead, CouchDB's date is just stored as a string. The big difference between MongoDB and Couch, I feel, besides that Couch is kind of edge, and there's kind of some neat ideas that the Couch guys have with things, and you can really run CouchDB as its own app and server, basically. But the big thing in terms of just using it as a data store is MongoDB is a lot more like SQL and like we're used to. It's dynamic queries, find by this, find, login is equal to Joe, and things like that, where Couch uses MapReduce. I actually started an app using CouchDB and switched it to MongoDB because I eventually kind of ran into a wall. I'm just mid-level, and I had a really tough time with MapReduce. It was okay initially early on, but once I kind of started having things that they were relationships, you could think of them in real life as documents and things, which you try to do with these databases. But MapReduce was pretty tough and kind of a wall I felt like I couldn't get over and was going to run into a lot of issues. So for that, I felt MongoDB was really nice for a more traditional web app. Okay, for storage, GridFS versus attachments. CouchDB, I really liked the way the attachments worked. It was really nice. MongoDB's GridFS is supposed to be really powerful, but trying to send that data through an app was way too slow because you have to use send data in Rails or in MERB. So until they get into Apache or Nginx module, it's not too useful, I don't think, but their plan is to make it kind of like Amazon S3. So a nice thing about Mongo is it stores as much as it can in RAM. So it's working kind of like Memcache as far as I know. I haven't played with Memcache. But as far as I know, it's basically you're getting the cache right there because as much when you've got a query going, you've got it in RAM, so it's nice and fast. Where with Mongo, you're just going to have your HTTP, or with Couch, you got your HTTP cache and whatever else you cache things with. So Mongo's kind of good for the web, and I felt like it was faster development time. I really noticed a difference once I switched things over. I was able to get through stuff a lot faster. So for a traditional web app, it was nice. Where Couch is also good at the web, but I kind of see it as more, once they get things going, I see it as more edge web. Running things on your phone, running things in the browser. For instance, like Google Chrome's got Python going in the browser now, and I think that eventually you'll get Couch in there, and then I think CouchDB will become very useful then. But for a more traditional web app, like if you're building a Twitter clone or, you know, an online community, I think MongoDB is the way to go. And then there's MongoDB works update in place, where Couch is MVCC, which is nice and fault tolerant. This stuff I don't know too well, because I haven't gotten to a point where I've had to scale anything. And I see Mongo kind of like a 50s kid. It's more traditional. It's what we're sort of used to, but it's also faster. It's rock and roll. It's faster cars, where Couch is sort of indie kid. It's the latest. They have some crazy neat ideas about things. The way you can basically build an app in CouchDB and view source, and you can see how the app works. Kind of like when the web started early on, and you could view source and see HTML. Their idea is that you'll be able to run apps, and that kids will be able to see, okay, that's the JavaScript that's making this app work. Where Mongo is traditional, and it's running back on your server, no one's going to be able to see it. So Couch has that possibility for the future. So, but for a traditional app, I went with Mongo. Okay, and these are some of the ORMs. You can run just with the driver, so you could just use the driver. Like if you were, you know, doing it with a Python app, you could just use the driver, but it's kind of low level and stuff. The drivers I found, there's a MongoMapper that looked pretty appealing, and there's also Autumn for Python. And that was by the Slice Host guy. So I think that was probably a good, maybe a good bet. He really likes that. And then there's an ActiveRecord adapter. I wouldn't use that, or MongoRecord. For Ruby guys, MongoMapper is really the way to go. So to get started, for MongoMapper, so this is where I kind of leave the Python guys. Sudo gem install MongoMapper, config gem. Model looks like this. So instead of ActiveRecord with it inheriting, you put it in there. And your keys, which is your schema. There's no migrations or anything like that. Kind of like using Data Mapper, except the database itself doesn't need migrations. Here's your controller. So similar to ActiveRecord, books, books.all. If you saw this in CouchDB, you have to do these view bys, and you have to set them up in your model, and you have to write them in JavaScript. And they're kind of neat because they're really powerful, but if you have the MapReduce skills. Otherwise, you're kind of getting the speed and things and the schemaless with Mongo, but without having the difficulty of Couch in terms of that. Validations, MongoMapper comes with validations. Callbacks comes with callbacks. Relationships, this is something CouchDB doesn't support, and something that we're very used to, setting things up relationship-wise. You still try to think setting things as a document. Like if there was a book, and a book was a document on your app, how would you set it up? Book would be its own model. And then maybe you'd have reviews as a relationship. And I'll show you in a second. Actually, I think reviews should be in the document model as sort of an embedded document. But for the sake of displaying, you can set up relationships. So just like you would in MySQL. And then finding would work just like MySQL. There's a bit of a catch. You'd want to be careful doing user.tweets.size. That'd be really slow because it'd load up all the tweets. But if you just went through the tweets and did the count, you'd get a lot faster if you didn't have something set up already, like a total count or something. Embedded documents. So if you take the review, you can actually embed it in the book document. So if a book was, you know, like a table of data, you'd have inside of there a column that would store all the reviews as an array. And so basically that's what it does. It doesn't do the automatic setting of the ID and things like that, so you have to set up that kind of stuff and create that. But once you have it, it works similar. And that should not be flight. That's from my app. That should be a book. So book, find by the ID, which would be like here if you had nested routes. So that would be book, find by the book ID, and reviews. And you create a new review. You can see you check if the review is valid, and then you put the review into the array, the embedded documents of reviews. You just push it in there, and then you check if it saves and everything, and then you redirect wherever you want. And additional info, create, update, out, include automatically. ID cannot currently be set with MongoMapper like it can in CouchRest, which I kind of liked about CouchApp because you could set your IDs as routes themselves. You could set book / you know, Harry Potter. So you could actually have an app that wouldn't really have routes. It would just pull the ID and it would look like a route on your app, which is kind of a neat idea. But MongoMapper, you can't currently do that. And you can't currently do custom fields, which is a nice thing actually in CouchRest. You could have the user create on the fly a custom field. There could be two fields or two text boxes. He could name his custom field and his value, and it would automatically add that into the schema list document. And then you could pull that out later, so that would already be ready for him in his form. So you could basically have users create stuff on the fly that way without having to keep them in a separate column per se. And there's indexing with it to keep things fast. And my conclusion is I moved to MongoDB and MongoMapper instead of CouchDB, and it was really nice development time. And I think it's a great alternative for MySQL. It's fast, and I've been really enjoying it. It's a good trade-off kind of in the middle. So, and that's it. Thank you. So any questions? Go ahead. Oh. It's for the video.
My question was, what kind of, you said that you encountered troubles with MapReduce that sort of slowed down your development time, and I was just curious if you could maybe give, I know this is kind of tangential, but could kind of give us an idea of what sort of high level, like what sort of structural things you found difficult to do in that structure.
Okay. Good question. I found kind of relationships. I was starting to put multiple information on a single page, and the idea I kind of had with MapReduce is I wanted to keep queries down to basically one query. So if I could create views with MapReduce, I could have a page that calls one query and would call everything on there for me. So I tried to do that as much as possible and had to do a few queries like normal. But I got to a point I'm doing an application for pilots. And they have flights. So there's a user, the pilot, there's flights, and then eventually there's airports, groups, and multiple stuff like that. And I was starting to get into the airports part where I found that basically I just couldn't pull all the information in the way I wanted from MapReduce. I just had a difficult time being able to say, okay, I want this information for this airport because this flight flew to that airport and this flight is related to this user. And be able to pull all that information in there and then also be able to pull on a flight and find all the users that have been flying, or on an airport and find all the users that have been flying to that airport based on their flights. So kind of that three-way relationship. So user to flight to airport. I was having a really trouble time putting that all together. So which isn't too good of an answer, but I had a hard time with MapReduce. So anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Oh.
I'm just wondering why a traditional database was ruled out. Did you have the volume? Did you have scaling issues?
No, I definitely don't have scaling issues. I haven't got to that point. I'm still mid-level. For me, I kind of wanted to get onto one and try it out. I heard it was faster and things. Tests showed it was faster. And the community seemed to be moving that way. So no, I didn't do anything like actually run good tests or anything like that to decide, okay, I'm not going to use MySQL. So for me, it's kind of an experimentation, and let's give this a shot. Anybody else? Okay, all right, thank you.